All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I see some folks sort of wandering in, and we're thrilled that you're joining us. And we're also thrilled that we've got some of the smartest and some of the brightest and exciting folks in the industry joining us. We got Danny. Danny from Granite Media is one of the smartest guys I know in the business, and Amanda Gomez, one of the badasses in the business. We're so excited to talk about some stuff that nobody really seems to talk about openly. And if you follow our show, you know we keep it real. And we've got two of the most real people here. And if we're really keeping it real, if we were in a beautiful destination, we'd probably be somewhere starting off this kind of conversation with a drink at the bar. That's how we do this. So cheers.
I would be upgrading my green tea if we were together.
There we go. There we go. Cheers. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Cheers. Cheers.
Charge it to admonsters.
That's right.
Cheers. That's right. Where's that tab? So, crazy title, Saving the Internet.
Yeah, bit intense. They kind of oversold us.
But we're okay with that. But saving the internet would require a lot of honest discussions, probably a whole lot more questions, a whole lot more answers. So we're going to do that today. So let's talk about what we're sort of experiencing. There's a tremendous sort of marketing tornado, if you will, that's out there from all kinds of companies that seem to have the solution, right? But they're all sort of solving the same thing, but they're kind of going about doing it in a lot of different ways. So I think there's a lot of impact there, whether you're the CEO, you're the boss, or if you've got a couple of bosses above you and you've got to report upwards and somehow communicate what's being done for this sort of crazy next 18, 20 months, 16 months even. What's that look like? So I think this is where Amanda and Danny will be able to provide insights, but also I think the discussion really should be about what we're also hearing from other folks too, right? Because this is what we do as publishers, is be able to communicate with each other, understand what's happening, cut through some of that marketing tornado. So I'm going to start with you, Amanda. I want to ask you a little bit about, with all of the discussion around the, death of the third-party cookie and a number of solutions and consent and identity, what do you hear folks are going to be using as measurements of success, right? Like what are we measuring? Like what does success look like besides a higher CPM or RPM, things like that?
That's a very, very good
Well, first question.
Big.
It's bigger. I know. I'm feeling a lot of pressure right now. Especially with the intro you gave me, badass. I don't know if this is it right now. But yeah, that's a good question because to be honest, like I don't know if we fully know yet. There, kind of like you were saying, marketing tornado, like we are being hit as publishers left and right with so many people who claim to, know what all the problems are and how to solve for all the problems. But I feel like we as pubs are still trying to figure it out ourselves. And we're all so different that I feel like what I'm solving for might not necessarily be what others are solving for. Like prime example, cookieless world, identity and everything else. Like you would think New York Post, we've been around over 200 years since, shameless plug, 1801. We were founded by Alexander Hamilton. If you did not know, fun fact. Fun fact. Yeah, you would think we would have, login data and all this stuff about our users. We don't. Like we are starting from scratch, just like some of the other pubs that are out there. So for us, like we're kind of starting at the beginning right now and trying to figure out, okay, like where do we need to start? Where do we need to go to? We're bringing on our CDP, start with our email addresses, go from there. But like we're at that stage, whereas, there are other pubs that are so much further along that like we're all trying to solve for different things. So what are we measuring? Who knows?
I want some of that,
great
first
point.
party Hamilton data.
Yeah.
We're going to have to compete against really old publishers with, anyways.
Let's do it.
Yeah, Atlantic brand in me really wants to come out. Danny, I want to go to you because believe it or not, people that are watching, all four of you, we did a pre-show and we talked about a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that I thought was super interesting was your take on contextual and sort of the future of that, or the past and future of it. I don't know, Is there a future there? Is it like, should publishers care as much about it? Or because it feels like every time you talk to a buyer about contextual, they yawn mid-sentence. So is there there?
I think there's definitely a there. The question is, sadly, I think it's going to play out in years, not months. So the real question is, how do you spend your time in 2020 as the ecosystem starts to evolve? Like if you just start from the top and look at it as basically two legs of the stool for post-cookie, you've got identity, you've got contextual. You either know the user or you don't, right? You can know the user or you can know the environment. And these are the two paths. And I don't take anything away from all the authentication and identity efforts and initiatives. I get it. But yeah, I'm stipulating. But we'll never, for the open web, we will always be playing catch up to closed platforms like social media. We're not going to have better answers for identity, but long term, we could have better answers for contextual. One of the biggest bait and switches, we talked about this before, is pre-social media and closed platforms. You run a direct sales team. If you have anything that looks like user-generated content on your site, they're like, I'm not running any ads on your webpage. Don't put me anywhere near user-generated content. And all of a sudden they get a taste of retargeting on Facebook and they're like, context, who cares? I want to know who the person is. Like, this is fantastic. And we talk out of both sides of our mouth. You keep using, you keep saying negative targeting here, but here I don't care about that targeting because I have the user. So I think that people are starting to wake up to the fact that some of these closed platforms have a contextual Achilles heel. So I think in the realm of publishing, getting back to at the highest level without requiring a lot of tech, good brands with good vertically oriented categories, and then starting to get into the tech around page level conversations, thematic conversations, clustering and AI for contextual, whatever you want to do. I think that's where it gets really messy. But I think it's a noble goal because I think it's where publishers can win. So we should fight for that to work. The problem is the investment in the ecosystem has really not evolved since AdWords 10 years ago. Like AdWords is still probably the best way to do a contextual buy today because it's soup to nuts. You go into the UI, you have a keyword planner, you put some stuff in, your campaign gets optimized, it runs across the display network, you're done. That doesn't exist in OpenRTB. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's so many layers of what needs to come together in the ecosystem for it to work that easily. So I'm super bullish long term, but I think we have some dislocation in the ecosystem and some chicken egg problems to make it work. And I think the leaders right now are probably going to be just cutting to who I think is going to lead the charge. Probably private equity funded companies who have been doing brand verification and suitability, which is absolutely not the same thing as contextual. That's like negative contextual, but the problem we need to solve is positive contextual. But I think they have the money in the balance sheets and they're in a place in the ecosystem where they may lead sooner than DSPs who don't seem to be doing a lot.
I
have a question for both Amanda and Ryan, because I think, I want to keep going there, but I wanted to sort of think about, whose responsibility is it to sort of make these decisions within an organization with, tremendous media brands that have multiple stakeholders, right? So what does this mean for a programmatic team or for a yield team or for audience or for subscriptions or for direct sales? Like, can you guys sort of name different groups that I don't think a lot of other folks think about when you have to bring a lot of people to the table? What are some of those departments? What are some of those parts of an organization?
Brian,
did I name them all?
Yeah.
Did I name them all?
All of the above. I mean, it really is all of them. And unfortunately, as we all know, we do not all get along all the time. So it definitely, comes with its challenges trying to make us all, work together for essentially what I think is a common goal, but it's not. I mean, even, going back to all the identity stuff and all we're talking about, like even that, it's taking programmatic, membership, subscriptions. So that's all like marketing on our side. Like our CEO is involved, our COO is involved, our product team is involved, our IT team is involved. It's like everybody and their mother. and everybody has a different opinion. Everybody thinks, it should work this way, but it really is like, how do we cohesively figure it out? Like, what are the KPIs? Again, going back to the first question, what are we trying to solve for? It's like, we almost need to figure out like, what is our end game? And then like, how do we get there? And like, who do we need? Right. Who are the key stakeholders from that? But if we don't know what we're solving for, which a lot of times we don't, or we are just trying to like throw shit at a wall and make it stick, I think that's the problem.
Well, right now it seems like some of that solution is like 5 to 15% of a publisher's business versus 70, 60, 70, 90%. So Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to throw a million different answers and questions at the same time, because this is what I do. First thing, it's really, really hard. Even just bridging the gap, let's say between, so we call it consumer revenue, subscriptions, whatever you want to call it, and ads, because while they're like two sides of the same coin, they're not looking for the same things. The indications of churn or high propensity are not necessarily, like, most advertisers don't care about the same things. So like we're trying to do, at least internally, because we're asking a lot of the same questions that Amanda was talking about, which is just like, what do we want? Like, where do we want to go? What do we want to be able to do? And just trying to figure out like the blocking and tackling of that. But it's building blocks. And I think we can get about 80% of the way there doing similar stuff. Like, sort of, I keep using this phrase that I stole from someone on my team, but this notion of ingredients instead of recipes, like building these ingredients and coming up with what are the core ingredients? What's your salt? What's your pepper? What's your flour? That can be reused by everyone all the time. But it's hard. You have to be thoughtful, because once you pick a thing, now you're going to devote resources. Now you're going to go deep, and you might not realize until, like, if you realize in Q2 or Q3 that it was the wrong thing, all right, there went 2021. Like, that's fun. We wasted how many developer resources on that, or data science, or whatever. I mean, and all of these are, most of us, I imagine, are somewhat lean of those things, data science resources and dev resources. But I wanted to, the multi-part thing, I wanted to go back to Danny's thing, because like, my heart of hearts, I want to agree with you on contextual. My fear, and someone else I was talking to earlier this week brought it up more succinctly, is what happens in 18 months if like the flock, federated learning of cohorts, what if that just becomes the thing? And buyers just are like, oh, okay, so that's our thing now, we're going to do that. And like, you've now devoted 18 months to like come up with your version of project fields, or, and now it's not worth anything, or, it was worth the press release and for an extra thing for your sales reps to go out there, but like, no buyer is actually is putting big money on it. Like, isn't that a risk you run? It feels like a risk we're all running about everything. But
so I think to me, the question is whether the flock cohorts is solving a contextual issue, or it's another proxy for identity. Like, we publishers in particular, we conflate these things, and you can see that all the time as we talk about setting up, DMPs and PMP deals, and we use contextual on steroids to basically build out audience segments that are interests, and we really trying to sell the audience as opposed to contextual. So when I look at the flock cohort stuff, actually, I don't necessarily look at that and think, is that going to be better or different from contextual? I think of it as, is that going to be a better way to handle audience? And I still think there's room for contextual. Part of it, and I have no clue on whether it's like your big investment and it'll work. I actually think the sad thing is publishers want contextual now more so than buyers do, but buyers are starting to ask the questions. They are clearly intrigued. It's just, there has not been a buy-side watershed moment. And if you don't have a buy-side watershed moment, I think it will be hard for everybody to fall in line. So you need the Mark Pritchard getting up and talking about viewability, and all of a sudden everyone's like, holy crap, or fraud, fraud. And I think if you don't have that watershed that's led by the buy side, it's going to be really hard for the sell side to just stoke it forward and make it happen. So I'm definitely not suggesting put all your eggs in the contextual basket and go do a whole bunch of custom tech, unless that's core to your own PMP direct sales strategy where you're using it to solve audience. But I think it's something we need to be talking about, and we need to find a way to get the buy side more excited about it. So I would invest in the conversation before the technology.
Yeah, I would say that's like a really good point, because unless we get, the buyers on board, like what are we trying to solve for? And even, just in general with everything going on, like I had a meeting earlier today and we were talking about audiences and, building out segments and all of this. And somebody actually asked a question like, well, have you spoken to the buyers about what they're doing? And, we're literally having this whole conversation about how we want to build out all these segments, but it's like, well, do the buyers even want them? Like, are we just wasting our time?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know how we, get more engaged with them, or just have them, tell us kind of what their thoughts and process and plans are. If we have asked the questions to them, when the third-party cookie goes away, what do you plan on doing? And I feel like a lot of them still, they don't know either. It seems like we're all just kind of flying blind and kind of, like Danny said, like egg before the chicken, like, which one?
Do they have any reason?
Go ahead.
Do they have any reason to panic like we do?
Right.
I mean, to them, isn't the alternative just I'm going to spend on Facebook or wherever, Google? Like the group that's not panicking as much as I feel like they should. And so I'm wondering why, like, there's 4 of us in here that are all some version of our feet shaking under the table right now. But where are the DSPs? Because if audience-based buying comes to a halt, what is happening to the trade desk's valuation? I think, right. I don't know. This is, and I know they're putting out something out there, but we can get into logged in user data and all that. But what percentage of anyone's audience, actually, what percentage of publishers have more than 10% of their audience logged in at a given moment? It feels small. It feels like that's a very small world.
And it can't go. Yeah. It can't. There's a natural ceiling for that. The end of the day is the largest driver of organic traffic is Google search. So just think about it as a user. You're on your phone. You're gonna do a search. It's one thing today to get all the accept buttons for cookies. I think there's total blindness now. Let's get this banner crap out of my face. But if you ask them to share your email address using Google sign-in, you will probably get kicked to Google, then have to accept and then back. Who's going to do that off search? Maybe some, but it's not going to be 80%.
No.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second.
I
think that's interesting. Yeah, Danny, I was going to say that I think the third-party cookie going away, right? This boogeyman, this bad thing, terrible for privacy. Do we believe that a user or the audience really understands consent, or really understands privacy, or really understands like that new trade-off, or giving up an email or a phone number, or the billing info, or anything else that could be utilized? Like what do you think about that, and sort of the lack of understanding there? Because if you think about it, that is kind of the pillar, that is a lot of what's driving the discussion for some sort of change or bridge of a process, right? And there's only so much real estate on the screens. Danny, you talked about the blindness and people are just clicking on things they don't understand. So, what does that really sort of look like, as it's going to continue to increase and sort of scale up?
Yeah, because it feels like giving you a cookie that tells you where I've been or what I have abandoned in a cart is way less personally, privately invasive than my personal email address. Like back in the day, and maybe again, I made this awful joke before, but like maybe I have to get another Hotmail account, because back in the day that was my spam account, and Gmail was my real. Is that what I have to do again? Like, because I thought we were beyond this, but my email account is way more private, or way more personally identifiable than any of my cookies. So, have the identity solutions missed the point of all of this? And like, as we're already seeing with Apple, someone had a good tweet recently where, Apple was essentially like, I'm sorry, you thought that you could just do salted and hash emails and that would be okay? Like, I'm pretty sure the money line was, "Are you high?" But are these even answers? The solutions that we see for identity right now, are they even actually viable solutions in 18 months when this is going to matter? And as an industry, like, are these the solutions that we actually want, or are we just like borrowing trouble by just confusing the user with a worse terms of service and giving them actually less privacy than they have before?
Yes,
Sounds
to
like
all of that. So I think again, I don't think there's anything wrong with publishers wanting to figure out how to use, and like, everybody's playing the game, everybody's within the rules, and if social media can do it, why shouldn't a large company be able to do it if they have the relationship with the users? So it isn't that it's fundamentally flawed there. I think this idea, though, I go back to, if you really wanted to solve for the consumer, I share Ryan's concern that this does not solve the problem for the consumer. The consumer does not like creepy ads following them across the internet. So if the answer is you're just using more personally identifiable data, but still will probably get the same amount of creepy ads across the internet, I feel like this is one of these, if it works, if the technology works so well, isn't there going to be a policy person who at some point is going to stand up and be like, that's not the point. I don't care that you figured out how to do it with email. You can't, or something. I don't know. It's just, I don't look at it and say that it feels perfectly aligned.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, would we say that almost we want the ads to, or there's a desire to have the ads to be a little bit dumber?
Well, not to call it dumber, but contextual does make more sense there. Right. And there's this whole question of like, does audience targeting work as well as the investment into it? So let's say my site indexes 60% for female. That means given 100 chances, on average, you're going to get about 60 women, 40 men. Then let's say I apply some form of targeting over top. I think they've shown it best is you can get up to 80%. So we're bridging that delta is 20%. How much investment went into bridging that? How much privacy did you lose? How much of my own data on a site did I lose? How much control did everyone lose? And how many middlemen got it? All for that 20% delta. It feels like there's got to be a better way here. But trying to tie it back to this insane title that they've given us, if thinking more to 2021, all right, everyone's a little bit skeptical of this identity, investing too much time in identity, but understanding that like the open auction is going to need some form of answer there. Contextual is something that probably requires a decent amount of investment. So like, where are you guys putting your chips?
Yeah, we put more chips on contextual than identity, because for us, identity, we're not gonna revamp our entire business strategy around getting an email address yet. Never say never, but it's
I would say we're like right dab in between. We keep going back and forth, especially like we're part of News Corp, so we're looking at a lot of this at a corporate level, and that you're taking. Want to talk about a lot of cooks in the kitchen? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And it is fascinating just hearing everybody's different, because again, we're all such different publishers. From the Post, you have Realtor.com, which obviously is real estate, Wall Street Journal, which, is more news, finance, same thing with Barron's, and like all trying to figure out kind of similar way to move forward. And then when you throw News UK and News Australia into it, like we're just kind of all sorts of all over the place. So we right now, like we're talking about both things and kind of leaning very into identity, but also we have been having those contextual conversations, and does it work? And, it's, again, I don't, like a lot of people, we don't have the solve, not yet.
And I think
so. It's kind of like, if you remember the times where we used to have a cocktail party, you'd have maybe 20, 30 people over, but everybody brought their own type of booze and everybody brought their own cocktail mix. And you look over at the kitchen where all the stuff is at, and it's an assortment of crazy shit, crazy stuff everywhere, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out how to pick up and use and make a drink.
Pretty much. And, you know, some combinations will work and some will not. And it's kind of finding that. About.
So, you know, let's talk a little bit about some of the roles that are also impacted. I think, you know, we talked about sort of sellers and then buyers. You know, this clearly is going to have impact on numerous groups, right? So direct sellers, right? How you organize your inventory and then how you go to market with it, even from a programmatic perspective, right? So a lot of these things change. What are some things that some folks aren't necessarily thinking about when it comes to some things like that?
Okay. While there's a pause, I want to answer Trevor while you guys are thinking through that.
Oh,
what
nice.
What are ways that you're thinking of maximizing? We call it ARPU, but it's the same idea: average revenue per user or visitor as a pub, but still give visitors what they want. There are a lot of ways. The worst, like going from worst to best, is adding more shit that's not content on the page. Next is jamming more tech providers in there that claim they're going to get you better fill or better CPMs or all of that just in the end are screwing you in some way, shape, or form. You're just not aware of it yet. And then going from there, Jess, good answer. She would. I work with Jess. So yes, the things that I find most interesting are figuring out, like, there are ways. Your ad server is dumb. Your ad server is very simple. It is, I have standard priority, I have price priority. Even the standard priority is sort of one blob, and the CPM you put in there doesn't really matter. It's kind of like, whose line is it? But there's a way. You get signals on the page. You get signals from your client-side header bidders on whether a person is valuable to programmatic or not. And I think for us, one of the things that became interesting was this notion of, I would rather have a $1 programmatic CPM than a $20 direct CPM, if I believe the scarcity of that $1 CPM is more infrequent than that $20 CPM for direct. In which that's how we've started to think through yield, and that's how we've started to think through average revenue per user. Is essentially, what can we do that doesn't piss the user off more, but is smarter with what we have? Do you put better things in front of them that they want to click on? Are you smarter about that stuff? Are you smarter about, do you make the page experience better? Is everything faster? That sort of thing. How about, Amanda, you and Danny are sort of very different publishers. And Erik, you consult with a lot of publishers on this. Mm-hmm. How do you get them to ramp up average revenue per user?
I'll let you all kick it off.
Yeah, so so it's this is a hard thing about our industry, is like giving users what they want, and really, you know, our job is we're mixing content with ads. And so I don't want to oversimplify. Generally, they want more content. Generally, they want less ads, right? I mean, that's where it's a natural tension. So we think about it as two ways, which is, one is if you hold constant your ad load, but you make the ads faster, or you increase the CPM, or you do things where your finite resource is more valuable without slowing down the page or doing other things that hurt the user, then you are increasing ARPU without causing more cost. And then on the flip side, we look at time on site as our intermediate metric, where we feel like that's a currency for the users getting more of what we want. And if there's some, you keep that fixed ratio of ads to content the same, then everything, we believe time on site, everything else that we've measured is generally a pretty good indicator that the user is having a decent experience. So we look for 3-4 minute plus engagement experiences to really know that and that can come from research, and it can come from, hooking short form into long form, and it can come from other stuff. But I do feel like time on site is a pretty good intermediate metric to getting people more of what they actually want.
Yeah, so going along with that, we look at time on site, but we also look at, say, articles consumed. So it's, so I guess they're essentially the same thing, almost hand in hand. But it's, like obviously if somebody's in their one and done, like, okay, fine. But the hope is to get them to stay longer and, what will their experience be? And so, I mean, even for us at the Post right now, we are actually in the process of, we're going to get ready to go through a little bit of I don't even know if I should be saying this, so but like a little bit of a redesign. Like we're probably going to refresh our homepage and just change some things up and like hope that it will be a better experience. And this actually kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, getting all the key stakeholders in one room to figure out like, okay, like Amanda wants to make money. At the end of the day, everybody else wants to make revenue, money too, so they can get paid. But we also do need to take things like, what do you call it, like SEO and search and all of that into account. So it is just like trying to find that balance. But really the hope of when we started this kind of journey on this redesign was figuring out what are the KPIs, and one of them is time spent. How many articles are you reading? And to go along with reading some of the questions, to go along with KP's question, Katie Pillage. Hi, Katie. We are actually also in the process of figuring out, a membership opportunity. And with that, we probably will start A/B testing the different experience to see, what do people like better? And is there something that might keep them around longer? So unfortunately, a lot of it is, I feel, a lot of A/B testing, guessing and checking. But see how it all goes.
That's a big deal, is building out just the infrastructure to be able to A/B test, and then to know what you're looking at and to measure, like to define a proper control. Like even that is, we've found, we try to be very careful. Sometimes you even when you mess up the control, now you've messed up an entire week. But to Danny's point, so you can do time on page or session duration, or, you can do articles per session. You can do number of sessions per week. That's the other thing. So we have an entire group in our company that is focused on this notion of habit. And these are the metrics that they constantly comb through. It's like, which one is the North Star? And Erik, to bring this way back to a point that you brought up in the beginning, it's thinking through, like, you have to be really conscientious of what metrics you make important and aware of sort of the strengths and weaknesses of those. Because all of them, it's basically like, let's say I am too busy to focus on anything else and I'm exclusively on this North Star metric. What could possibly, what could I be missing, or what could I falsely optimize towards? And we try to think that through, because everyone here gave a good answer on user habit metric that's different, which is interesting to me. I guess
it probably correlates to what your high-level business goal is, because I definitely think if you're trying to drive membership, then this is a very different thing than if you're trying to solve ARPU through advertising.
Yeah, but I think that's. Oh no, sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off. But to say, I feel like it ties it all back together. Like, we're all so different, and there is not one solve for all of us, which is, I feel like, another solve they're trying to solve for.
And I think there's a question on, do you show different UXs to different users? And we used to, at my old company, this company, for years, and now we don't. And I think part of it is not because it made more or less money, but pulling up, it felt a little, I don't know, we were conflicted on the goal. It's like, how do you, if you want to make a non-loyal user a loyal user, but you're giving them, you're treating them as economy class, but you want them to be first class. And it also just makes it super weird for yourself, for your product team, for your partners, for your customers, for your advertisers. When they land on certain things, you really need to explain, well, that's not what most people see. But then they tripped on it and they saw something. So I think for us, we felt like if you fork them, you start making maybe some micro decisions that might lead you to have a bad UX in certain cases. And we'd rather just rebase it and just, it should feel like it's good enough for everybody.
I will say, I think if you're making a purely ad-based UX decision,
Yeah.
or you're a business that is primarily ad-driven, I agree with 100% what you're saying. You will accidentally optimize to a worse UX somewhere along the way. That's just how that's going to go. Whether it, like, I know some for refers or social, or that, like, there are various ways in which you end up there. But I think if you have, like, so we have a subscription business. So for us, there are thoughts around, and we don't do anything like this yet, but there are conversations and A/B tests around high propensity or high churn users, or high, like, because that conversion is worth way more than 2 or 3 page views of ad revenue. So if you can jump that conversion rate 20%, like, but these are the things that you have to look at for your individual business. It's going to be different from every single publisher. And, again, so we are one site with one set of owners and one group. There are cooks in the kitchen, and it feels like too many of them to me.
Yeah.
But compared to Amanda, I mean, there are just so many more stakeholders who have a vastly different set of interests. But, Steph Laser's over there at News Corp as well, and she's trying to herd cats to all do a similar thing, which, that's got to be hard to do, because what Wall Street Journal wants and what you guys want.
I'm one of the cats. That's me.
Okay, let's explore that for a second. I mean, like, the complexities there, and I know there's a lot of folks that have joined us that have been here that don't, they don't have a plan. And I think, Amanda and Danny, sort of the differences in your organizations are great examples for most of the web. And so, what are some ways and some recommendations, maybe 2 or 3 ways to get started for publishers trying to figure out how to assemble a plan for a third-party cookieless sort of future? What are, like, maybe 2 or 3 ways to get started? Because it seems like a lot of publishers, if they don't have a plan right now for how to test solutions or how to meet with vendors or how to get started, I mean, you'd be surprised with how many folks don't even have a way to get off the starting block. So what are a couple of ways to sort of kickstart that for some folks that are in the audience and that may see this later on what they can do to be helpful or what they can do to be successful?
That's a big one. I'll let Amanda go first.
Oh, damn it.
Hey, we're saving the internet here. Don't remember the title? It's hard.
I don't even know. I feel like, well, one is, if you're not signed up for, I'll give the plug, like admonsters or, a lot of those, like, one, you should be kind of staying in touch and in tune with what's going on. Like, I feel like you need to do your homework first, stay on the trends, like, what's going on. I feel like if you're not doing that, then, like, you're already dead in the water. But second, yeah, I feel like from there, I don't even, like, know. What do you do?
That's right. Let me ask you this, because let me ask you this. What are some things that you all are not really willing to do, right? Because it seems like there's a bunch of things that people are asking us to do. Try this, place this here, do that, right? Try this. What are some things?
No, it's funny that you say that, because I was on a call kind of about identity right before this, and it was with a few different pubs, and literally came up, but it was a smaller pub, and he's like, "Oh, we're trying everybody, we're putting everything in," and I feel like us bigger pubs are like, "No, absolutely not," and we're kind of all on the same page, and I feel like that's probably one big mistake is, just because you're getting hit with all these emails and everybody's offering you something, like, you don't have to do it all. You can say no.
This is normally normally I say that, and then this is where Erik checks me. But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna channel my Erik in that, because I'm 100% on the same page with you, man. Like, we haven't entertained anyone on our site because basically, and this is from a publisher privileged place to be, but my theory is, like, if a lot of money starts flowing through there's no way I missed the boat. Like, someone's going to come to us, and to me, the risks of the unknown unknowns are just too large. I just don't know. I don't know my privacy loss fully. I don't know what I'm risking by doing this, and I do know I have a high possibility of pissing off my developers and product team, because they're going to be like, why am I doing this is it making us any money? And when I'm like, oh, well, it made us $150 this week. But I will say we are in a position of, we have a pretty strong direct sales team. We don't rely strongly on programmatic, and we are primarily US already. So like, it's easier for me to squeeze extra out of mine. I mean, it's hard for everyone, but it's easier than someone who has a non-US based, or who the reason everyone is getting paid is because they're 85% programmatic revenue. Like, the notion of a 10% bump on that is make or break for hiring 2 more people. And so I understand why it's hard. I do agree with you that I would recommend caution at the very least, at least from companies you don't know, or companies you know not to trust. Like, maybe don't start with those companies. We all know who they are, or if we don't know who I'm talking about, you probably have your own version of that person.
Yeah, so I mean, there's kind of 2 things we're talking about, right? One is the where to go, and then the who do you trust and who do you use? And for sure, they're related for us, which is we start, and we're a small company, so I imagine a big company, you need to do this even more. We start with the answer is no to everything. It's like the scientific hypothesis method. It's all crap until you prove to me it's not crap. Yeah. So I think if you're truly starting and you don't have a lot of experience in the industry, the thing to realize is there are very few diamonds in the rough. And your job is not to go find the diamond in the rough, in my opinion, right? For everything. You can't just go find all the diamonds in the rough, because you will die looking. And so for me, it's finding people you trust. Like, if you read and you haven't heard of the company and the company's not doing a lot, there's probably a reason. And I'll say no to anything I haven't heard of, unless the only way to get me to a second email, not even a phone call, and don't take phone calls to look for diamonds in the rough. That is that's a huge waste of calendar time. But you tell me 3 of your top publishers that you work with, and you offer them as references.
Yep.
Because I will absolutely trust another publisher, 100%, another publisher who I believe has already done it and has blazed the trail. Now we can have a conversation, but it's not my job to go find the diamond in the rough. So that to me is how you cut through the noise. On the where to start for 2021, I think it's kind of related, which is, again, I don't think there's a silver bullet. And what we try to do is we try to define kind of lead, follow, ignore. And as I mentioned, almost everything goes into ignore. And then we as a company, I don't think there's an answer. I don't think Amanda's answer, mine is going to be the same. But depending on your goal as a company, you shouldn't need to read. You should know what your goal of a company is to say, I'm willing to try and lead in this one area.
Yep.
And I cannot lead anywhere else. And these 3, I think, are interesting, and I will fast follow. But it should actually start by looking at your own organization, not the ecosystem, to define those priorities, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
It sounds like create a plan, right? You got to figure out, also got to work with the calendar a bit, right? Understanding like what you can do, what you can't do. You got to figure out who's going to sort of lead these projects and work with potentially multiple sort of stakeholders, maybe break down some silos, right? And then you start beginning to sort of figure out who the sort of partners are out there, versus just like work with everybody and see what works.
You shouldn't work with
right?
a partner just because. What?
Oh, I was.
Oh no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say you shouldn't work with a partner just because they emailed you, and just if they're saying they're going to give you some kind of guarantee, chances are that is too good to be true. You have to make sure you're asking the right questions, and kind of like Daniel was saying, do your due diligence. Especially now, I feel like the industry has come such a long way. There are so many things at our fingertips. And I know you guys are you're on them also. This second I'm like, oh, I have a question about, this company that messaged me. There's so many Slack channels and people you can reach out to now. It's use your resources.
I 100% love the notion of looking inward first on that. Before you even start listening to these cold calls or these emails that come in, or this person that knows your head of sales, you understand. I love that framework, the lead, follow, ignore, because it's, yeah, that's it. I mean, and it should be limited. You should know what you're very good at, and the things that, I don't know, that you're either most curious about or find the most opportunity. And they should be.
Then you call your references and say, I want to do more in this one area. So you tell me who I should go. And then that's, your diligence time is a finite resource.
Yeah.
Right? Not only just your action time. Your own time to do diligence is finite. So you should chart your calendar for diligence. You should figure out what you want to get smart on.
What about spending time with the buyers? We talked about that earlier too, right? And so what are some ways, when we're thinking about how to sort of increase that? Because in such sort of confusing times or trying to figure out what the right path forward is, or paths, really, there are going to be several things that we need to do, right? It's not just one thing, like we said, right? Do we feel that like that amount of time generally should increase, where we're talking with our buyers and talking with them to actually figure out what they want, right? So instead of sort of retreating and sort of hiding from these sort of intimidating subjects, we should probably be spending more time with them, right? So what are some creative ways that you think of maybe you could help facilitate that a lot more? Is it using tech partners to be able to help facilitate more of that? Is that going and spending more time with buyers directly and saying, hey, we've got to tackle some big subjects? What are some ideas?
That's something we've actually kind of at New York Post, but also at News Corp, that we've kind of been doing, is trying to, again, like we were saying before, what is our goal and how do we get there? And part of that has been talking to some of the buyers out there to be like, okay, what are you thinking about? What is going on? Then should we, do X, Y, and Z? But definitely it's hard because I feel like the same way, we get bombarded with emails. We're also those people to buyers. Like, I have a programmatic sales rep on my team, and like, I feel so bad when he's like, it's been 3 weeks and this person still hasn't answered me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm normally that person who's not doing the answering. So I feel like part of it is like trying to, get in with some of the buyers. But when you do, like, really honing in on those relationships and then talking to them, seeing, what they're thinking, what's going on, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who, are helping us make our revenue. Sorry, I feel like that's very long-winded and all over the place.
The best answers, or exclusively the ones I give, so it's fine.
I'm like, did I even answer the question? I don't know.
Getting close to buyers, getting close to buyers.
Any thought?
It's always hard, because the buyers, everything we just said about say no to everything until there's a reason you should say yes. Buyers were kind of that way with pubs, because they get bombarded, right? So they're kind of like, if I haven't already heard you or you're not already on my white list, I don't know why I'm talking to you. So there is a bit of a log jam. We're on the other side of it. I think your answers for whether you have a direct sales team and you're trying to influence PMP versus open auction obviously are very different. If you have boots on the ground trying to make relationships with buyers, you already kind of have your strategy. And I think there's always a yin yang, which is can you make open auction good enough that you talk using tech to the buyers? This is where I think, things like pre-bid are doing a tremendous amount of work to try and bring publishers together with SSPs, and I'll call them the revenue management companies. So this is the Cafe Media, Mediavine, Freestar, which I think a lot of people are not talking enough about, because I think they're actually becoming industry leaders in dealing with some of these problems. They're really brokering at a more technical level with the buy side across thousands of publishers. So I think there's lots of interesting trench warfare work happening in those conversations, and they percolate down to pre-bid, which I'm a real big fan of. I'd love to see us get the buy side more involved in pre-bid. That would be a great way for the open part. But then otherwise on the PMP level, I think, you go with your team.
Yeah.
You would think, right?
I know there's some questions out there. Let's get them out there. Unless everybody knows all the answers. Looks like everybody knows all the answers. That's it. Well, that's how you get rid of us.
Lasted, guys.
That's right. That's right. All right. So what are some predictions here for Q1? We're riding out a tough year that got a lot better according to most folks we talk with. Q1 predictions, Q2 predictions.
No one,
Q1, Q2.
Bill heard it. But we started this conversation this way.
Yeah.
Danny, do you want to kick it off? Because
with Q1, Q2.
Yeah. What?
I think the question with Q1 is always what degree of bad is your over under. It's never a good quarter. And I had a worse Q1 this year, and it sounds like you were saying you had a good Q1. I don't know if this is, I mean, Q4 has been so much better than we were expecting, and it's hard to know if it's truly the seismic shift in e-commerce, and so more retail spend is like permanent, and how much of it is we're burning up the fuel on all the budgets that had to get spent, by the end, and what does the economy have in hold for us in Q1? And I think beyond that, beyond Q1, I'm actually pretty bullish for Q2, because I do think whatever happens in Q1 will probably end in a better place. And I think programmatic is becoming a bigger thing overall, it goes without saying. So I think the long-term direction is probably healthy, but you've got the economic environment in Q1 that's really hard to tell. I mean, that can make or break it. Long wind, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, so we can get excited too for a better Q2 compared year over year, right? I mean,
if it's worse than last year, then like we really have.
Exactly. It's.
Are you guys starting to book anything for Q1 at all? Like, would you normally be booking now, and you're booking more or less in general?
I mean, we're actually booking more. I mean, not specifically for Q1, but for 2021, we are, at least on the direct sold side, I can say we're well ahead of where we were for 2019 going into 2020. But that's the part I'm most curious about for Q1. Like, are we still on the quarterly spend cycle, or have we gotten back to it? Because there was a period of time in which we were on the every 3 weeks spend cycle, in which that's about it.
Right.
And so I don't know. Is there I don't know. I would love to talk to an agency. Like, do they have to spend all of their budget by the end of Q4 this year? Or is there some sort of grace period in there where an advertiser was like, well, I didn't want to spend in November, and I didn't want to spend in August, and sure, I want to spend in December, but I don't want to be highly inefficient. Like, does some of that bleed into January?
Right. It's a good question, because I feel like that was the rumor that we all heard was, well, those budgets have to go somewhere, like they have to be spent. And I feel like we've all been waiting for them. And we definitely have seen the increases, which is great, but I feel like I want more pickup.
Yeah, well, I feel like from the few amount of buyers that I've spoken to about so many of them are interested in spending in January that was not the case most years. So that's the part that has me curious. I don't know how much of that is sort of direct sold budget versus open auction budget, and I don't even know how much those are different anymore. But it's
right.
I'm curious, because Danny, you make a very compelling case that it could be awful.
Yeah. Or does it go hand in hand, and not to because I feel like we've actually gone almost this entire time and nobody has said the word coronavirus or COVID-19, but as the vaccine gets rolled out and hopefully the economy picks up, will that be part of Q1, and will we start seeing some increases because of that?
I mean, travel spend will have to increase, right?
Right. I mean, it's there's so many unknowns. God.
Looks like we did get a question. Contextual first-party data may save direct and PMPs. What saves the open market once the cookie dies? I actually think, the point I was hoping to try to make is that contextual may save the open market. So this is why the buy side needs to, and the DSPs and the other folks need to invest in more buy side tech. Here's the funny thing about contextual. Do you actually, if you're a buyer, do you actually need the publisher to come up with a good contextual strategy? Do you actually need the publisher? At the end of the day, the page is the page. So what are you defining as context? Because you can do AI and you can do page scraping and you can get sentiment and keyword analysis. You don't actually need the publisher to tell you that. That's all open. So that's why there are things publishers can layer on top of it. But that's why I don't view contextual as only a PMP strategy, because if the tech is good, just like viewability, brand safety, suitability, that's all layered into the DSP buying with these like horizontal players like IAS Double Verify. I think that's where the investment in tech will happen. It may be sad if it's pulled out of the publisher's hands and that we now have technology intermediaries solving for it. But I do think it might inform the open auction.
But like, until that's in the bid stream, like those segments, and there's a clear taxonomy, and it looks, basically, I've always returned to, until it looks different in the DSP, or there's a way for them, other than the like brand safety, that is the only form of context, which I love that you refer to it as only negative context, that is seen in the DSP. Until that's done,
correct.
Again, this all distills down to, does a hungover 24-year-old media buyer, can they action on it? Because if they can't, then like, who's our audience?
I mean, part of it's keeping it simple too. You mentioned taxonomies, right? And so you mentioned, imagine like everyone trying to bring everything to market, but creates a different way to describe, to actually utilize or name, or so keeping it somewhat simple has to be part of the equation,
simple.
right?
We're
It's a hard
people.
It's a hard problem.
I think I was good. Wow, good timing, Bill. I was like,
Bill.
right on cue.
Look at Bill.
Hey, I just want you to know that
He's
Gavin
here.
is the one who names these sessions. So we set the bar high. And the next session is called Heavy Hitters with Stephanie Laser, Scott Messer, and Rachel McCombs. But I have to say, you guys were pretty heavy hitters here. I really appreciate, and I know the audience did too. 50 people we peaked out here, which is a lot for a breakout. Really great discussion. Thank you for being a part of Admonsters. We appreciate you guys. Keep it up.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Danny. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, everyone.